What's up? It's your pal Walker. Welcome in. This is episode 1 of the Third and Manageable podcast. This is a project I've been wanting to get started for some time, so I'm excited to do that. Hopefully it's something you can listen to in your spare time. Enjoy. Tell a friend if you like what you hear. We are on YouTube, and we're going to be on all of your favorite podcast platforms very soon, as soon as I get that all worked out. But I did want to go ahead and get started because we are right in the middle of the crucial part of college basketball season, and there's a lot to talk about with the UGA basketball team right now. And I know what you're thinking. Walker, you named your podcast Third and Manageable. It's a football term. Football season's over. Idiot. Trust me, I recognize from my time around Athens and living in the state of Georgia for a long time that football is king. It's a 365-day-a-year passion. We're going to spend plenty of time talking about Georgia football and all things football. But as mentioned, there are other things happening right now, and fans that I know that really, really love football also really, really love baseball, basketball, golf. We get into some soccer and hockey or whatever the topical thing is as we move along. But right now, basketball season, and for the University of Georgia team, things are not going well. I actually, watching that game against Texas A&M on Tuesday night, became frustrated with the UGA basketball team for the first time this season. And if you look back on the season, there are plenty of other times where it would have been easy to be frustrated. You go back to that Arkansas game, a 15-point lead in that one, the second half collapse there. The game in Gainesville against Florida just was never close. Dogs were never in that. Same with the Alabama game in Tuscaloosa. But you really, honestly, if you were being honest with yourself, looked at those games on the schedule and said, probably don't have a great chance to win those. I'm talking about Florida. I'm talking about Alabama. Arkansas, you thought maybe that was one you could steal. And certainly the game against Mississippi State this past Saturday was one you thought you could get. Georgia did not get either of those. But you're still looking at it saying, man, if we could just get 3 or 4 more wins, we could still find our way into this NCAA tournament in March. And you kept thinking, it's going to come together at some point, right? This team is too talented to struggle through the middle part and the end part of the season. At some point, they're going to get rolling. Maybe a game in College Station that you could just catch the Aggies sleeping. And Georgia really did that in the first half. I mean, they came out, they looked hungry, looked really good in that first half, but then comes the second half collapse that, quite honestly, you've started to expect. It happened in Fayetteville against Arkansas. If you remember going back, the Knoxville game, the Tennessee game in Knoxville, that was a game Georgia was right in at halftime, and the second half just completely got away from them. And so you're watching the first half of the A&M game, and you're thinking, okay, maybe this is something. It was about as frustrating and ugly of a second half of basketball as I have ever watched. There's a lot of reasons for that. You're on the road, you're playing a top 10 team. You got a quick turnaround. Played Saturday night at home, then you got to go Tuesday night on the road. That's difficult to do. You're down a couple of players. LeFew and Lawrence are on the bench. They would be contributing a lot of minutes. They were contributing no minutes. But with the way Blue Kane and Silas Demery were playing, you felt like, all right, this is something. But then in that second half, you let Texas A&M go on a 22-0 run. Do you realize how bad that is in a basketball game? A 22-0 run. And we've experienced these scoring droughts throughout the season where it feels like Georgia is just lost offensively, and they'll go 7, 8, 9 minutes without scoring. I mean, at one point, and I'm not trying to be funny, you wondered if the Dogs were going to put a field goal in the second half at all. And before you know it, your 11-point lead has turned into a 15-point deficit. We've seen it too often this year, and unfortunately, this year to me is starting to look a lot like last season, where in January you get a couple of wins early in the SEC and you think, all right, this is a team that can compete. You look back at January of this season, you got to win over St. John's and you got to win over Kentucky under your belt. You've just beaten Oklahoma at home. And not only are you expecting now to make the NCAA tournament, but you're thinking that you could make a run. This is a Sweet 16 team. And everybody in Athens bought in. I mean, people got behind it. That game at home against Auburn had a better crowd than we've experienced in some time. And then you go on that 4-game losing streak. Okay, well, can we beat South Carolina? Yeah, I did that. Can you beat LSU? Yeah, I did that. Okay, maybe we can still find a way. But you lose a couple of games that you really needed to boost your resume, and all of a sudden you get blown out again on the road by A&M, and you're thinking, is this team going to win anymore? How many more games on the schedule are winnable? It's just been a very, very frustrating couple of weeks. The South Carolina game, the LSU game, you were expected to win those, and Georgia did. But you got to get one that you're not expected to win at some point. And maybe that's still coming. You know, Missouri this weekend is a gettable game. That's a Saturday afternoon game at Stegman Coliseum. There's no reason that place can't be loud. We can't pack it out. And Missouri, although they are ranked in the top 25, is not Alabama, is not Auburn, is not Florida. So maybe that's the get-right game that we've been waiting for. And as far as possibilities of making the tournament, your magic number is still 3. It has been for a minute now. And you're running out of chances. You're starting to look at that schedule and go, where are those 3 wins going to come from? Okay, maybe Missouri this weekend. I feel like that's a must-win at this point. I feel like that is a got-to-have-it game at this point. Because I'm as optimistic as the next guy. I love looking at things with the glass half full, but going to Auburn and even being competitive against the number 1 team in the country is most likely not going to happen. And then you got Florida coming in, and they're ranked number 3 for a reason. They are very, very good. I know Georgia's pretty good at home, a lot better than they are on the road, but you don't feel like Georgia can beat Florida right now. So then you look ahead to March. Okay, and remember, in our hypothetical situation here, Georgia's already beaten Missouri. So you need 2 more wins in March. You got 3 games: at Texas, at South Carolina, home against Vanderbilt. None of those teams are ranked. South Carolina's maybe the worst team in the conference. All 3 of those games are winnable, but you don't want to go into March thinking, okay, we got to win all 3. You want to be there thinking, if we get 2 out of 3, we can still find our way into the tournament. And so I think that's the best path, honestly. Beat Missouri, at least keep that Florida game at home competitive for the people that are wanting you to pass the eyeball test. Steal one on the road at Texas or at South Carolina, and then finish by beating Vanderbilt. Yes, it's still doable, but we're at that point. We've reached that midseason slump where Georgia fans, at least the people I'm following on social media, are wondering if we're going to win any of those games. Hopefully the Dogs will prove me wrong and come out with a big performance this weekend against Missouri. I hope, as this is episode 1 of the podcast, I hope that by episode 300, we're looking back and saying, oh man, remember those bleak times where we weren't real sure about this team? And isn't it nice that we've now won the SEC tournament a couple of times and gone to a Final Four? Isn't that great? As we've been able to do with football, we hope down the road that we are having conversations like that. But for now, must-win game on Saturday. Go Dogs. Beat Mizzou. Moving on to what might be a little brighter topic. We'll go Atlanta Braves, and that is because the season really starts this week. Pitchers and catchers have reported. Spring training is happening. And so what's the outlook for the Atlanta Braves? And I've seen some people that are very high on the Braves. As a matter of fact, Vegas has Atlanta as one of the favorites to make the World Series, right behind the LA Dodgers, who spent $11 gazillion on their team this year. So that's a good sign. But I'm also seeing people that are like, we're not sure about Snicker. We're not sure about this team. Remember how it was last year? Well, here's what I want you to keep in mind about last year's Atlanta Braves. That team was very talented. That team was wrecked by injuries. You never can get into a flow offensively when you have that many people shuffling in and out of your lineup. And so I am cautiously optimistic right now on the Braves. That's why I broke out the Braves hat today. Let's be honest, I wear this hat all the time. I feel like the Braves going into the season have one of the best lineups in baseball. And I'm not trying to be dramatic or overly enthusiastic. I really do believe that's true. And you're thinking, well, last year they had the same team pretty much, and that didn't work out. Again, injuries really wrecked last season for the Atlanta Braves. And you would think that that's going to even out a little bit. You wouldn't think that 2 years in a row you were going to have that many problems with injury. It could happen. I'm not trying to jinx anything, but if you look at it right now, I think one of the best outfields in baseball with Profar and Kelnick and Money Mike. And of course, once Ronald Acuna Jr. steps back on the field in May, if he's anything like himself, I think you are going to have a very solid outfield there. Good hitters all around the horn with Olsen and Riley and Albies. We know that RC has struggled last year, especially with runners in scoring position, and he's going to have to improve there, or something's going to have to change there. We love Orlando's glove, and he probably, as the old baseball saying goes, saves you a run or two every time he's on the field defensively, but he's got to come through in some of those clutch spots. So that's really the one position where you're watching it. Sean Murphy, I think, is going to have a really nice bounce back year behind the plate. He's no longer platooning with d'Arnaud, so it's his job. We'll see if he can perform at a high level, and I think he can. And then when you put Chris Sale on the mound opening day, you're like, hey, this guy's as good as anybody in the major leagues. So you feel really good about things, right? Take a little deeper dive into it, and you look at that bench, and you say, okay, who is coming off the bench when guys need a day off, or if there are injuries? And right now, that is my concern. And it could just be that the bench right now is in Gwinnett. And the guys that are on the roster right now are not the guys that are going to be on the roster by the All-Star break. But I don't feel like there's anybody on that second team that can come in right now and contribute in any kind of big way. So that worries me. It also concerns me that the Braves did not address the starting pitching rotation. And we know Chris Sale's great, and when Spencer Strider comes back, we hope that he's great. We know he was great before, coming off a season-ending injury. We hope he can get back to form. But what's after that? Swellenbach was so good last year, but you don't necessarily know that that is going to translate from year one to year two. Grant Holmes, Ronaldo Lopez, these guys all performed well last year, and you're hoping they can do it again. But if somebody does falter, okay, well, you got Ian Anderson. There's just a lot of question marks there on the back end of that rotation. If Sale and Strider are doing their thing at 1-2, you're probably going to have a pretty good year. And it could just be something where we're going to see who steps up, and maybe by the midway point, if another big arm has not emerged, if Schwellenbach does take a step back, then you might have to consider a trade at the deadline. So concern about the depth of starting pitching, definite concerns about the depth in the bullpen. You got some good arms out there. You were just hoping that they could add another piece to that bullpen. Everyone was hoping for pitching in the offseason, and AA did not deliver, but I trust Alex and believe if he thinks that this team is ready to go and ready to compete for a World Series, I trust him. He knows a lot more than I do about this team. So high hopes for the Atlanta Braves. I know the Phillies got better in the East. I know the Mets got better in the East. And so when people are saying, oh, Braves are probably going to be third in the East this year, I don't necessarily buy that. It wouldn't necessarily shock me if that's how it ended up. I guess the final point would be we just don't know. We feel like this is a very talented team and feel like this could be a very competitive team, but I'm going to have to at least see a little bit from them before we go down that road and we crown them. And people always say, wait till Memorial Day, then you really know where your baseball team's at. I think it's going to be one of those seasons. Excited that things are getting started in Florida for the Braves, and I believe the 22nd of this month is the first spring training game. And we'll get rolling for real in late March. Go back to San Diego to start the season, where the season ended last year, hopefully with better results. Also on the Diamond Dogs, ready for them to get started this weekend. Georgia baseball last year, you probably remember, came within a game of Omaha and just really had a great year, and expecting more big things from Georgia baseball this season. Everything I've read, everything I've heard, there's a lot of great pitching on this team. There's a lot of depth on this team. You don't have Condon, but you got some big bats, and really Georgia starting the year preseason top 10. And at least in that building, in that clubhouse in Athens, they're expecting to win the whole thing. They really believe that this is a team not only capable of making it to Omaha, but winning a national championship. So very, very stoked for that. This weekend, Quinnipiac is the opponent. I can't say that I know a whole lot about Quinnipiac baseball, but that will be Friday, and then the first half of the doubleheader on Saturday, and then you switch and you play UNC Wilmington Saturday afternoon, and again on Sunday. The non-conference schedule doesn't have any big matchups this year. There's no big home series against a Power 5 team. It's just an opportunity to see what you got and hopefully accumulate some wins in the non-conference schedule, because once you get into the SEC schedule, it's just going to be very, very difficult as always, but a big season ahead. I think the Diamond Dogs are going to have a big year. So I'm excited to watch them over the next few months. And Georgia softball also, we can't skip over that. 5-0 last weekend in Orlando. The Black and Gold Classic there, put on by Central Florida. Georgia not only beats UCF, but knocks off Illinois, North Carolina State, some other teams. 5-0, and I mean, really all the games were blowouts. The softball team was a little bit surprising last weekend, because I thought, this team's pretty good. They also were in a super regional last year, but there's a lot of new faces there. And some of those freshman bats were really showing out last week. Not against any ranked teams, not getting overly excited yet, but Georgia comes home this weekend, Jack Turner Softball Complex, and hosts their own tournament. Michigan State coming to town. Western Carolina is going to be there. So hopefully more wins. It'd be great if we could get to 10 or 11 wins by the end of the weekend. It's the same in softball as it is in baseball. You're just trying to accumulate wins early in the year, see what you got, and boost your resume for later in the season and when you start talking about seeding in the NCAA tournament. Your Atlanta Hawks, whew, had a rough go of it there for a little while. But since the trade deadline, and I mean, I looked at the trade deadline and said, what are these guys doing? It felt like they gave DeAndre Hunter away. Traded for a bag of new basketballs and cash considerations and a 5th round draft pick in 2087. But as it turns out, watching these last few games, the Hawks did acquire some good pieces at the trade deadline. And these are second team guys. You don't have a marquee player to go along with Trae Young. We just never have, and I don't know that they will. But at least the Atlanta Hawks have gotten back on the winning side of things. I mean, 3 wins in a row. I'm recording this before the game against the Knicks on Wednesday night, so we'll see how that works out. But, I mean, I think they've won 4 out of 5 or something like that. So since the deadline, the Hawks have been looking a lot better. And the East right now, the Eastern Conference, other than Cleveland and Boston and maybe New York, is up for grabs. If you could get on a roll, win a bunch of games here in March and April, the Hawks could go as high as 5th or 6th, I think, in the East. I'm not saying that's going to happen. That's really being very optimistic and very generous. But that is the ceiling. Unfortunately, the floor is still, the 9 or 10 seed and the play-in tournament, which we are all, I think, done with at this point. I don't want to see the Hawks back in that play-in tournament. That may be how it ends up. Promised a little football. And, it's February. Recruiting is kind of done at this point. And, I mean, Kirby Smart wouldn't say that. ABC, right? Always be recruiting. But did want to just talk a little bit more about the Super Bowl and the Philly Dogs. And it's been covered on every show this week. But I want to join the chorus of people saying congratulations to those guys from the 2021-2022 Georgia defense that are showing out in the NFL and making a whole lot of money. And also want to join the chorus of people who are saying, hey, Atlanta Falcons, are you paying attention yet? Because Brandon Adams made a good point on his podcast this week. It used to be a little taboo to say, well, the Falcons should always draft UGA players because it sounded like you were just being a homer. And maybe we are. But now you have some legitimate data and you can look at it and say, hey, Philadelphia did what you should have done. Go out and shore up the lines of scrimmage, get a pass rush that is elite, to use Georgia football terminology, and the sky is the limit. And the Atlanta Falcons, unfortunately, still, in my opinion, make bonehead decisions. When you go pay a quarterback $130 million to play half a season and you draft a running back in the first round and you consistently go after players that are a little bit unknown. Hey, we got a really great pulling guard from North Dakota State in the second round. We're really excited about that. When you could have guys like Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter on your team, it's frustrating. And to watch another team collect all of those pieces from the University of Georgia because they know that Kirby Smart teaches good defense and go win a Super Bowl, Falcons fans just have to be shaking their head right now, saying that should have been us. Maybe it still could be. Maybe there are lessons to be learned, and maybe in this draft coming up in a couple months and in future drafts, the Falcons may decide to go that direction. But there's one thing you can say for the ownership of that team. They're not known for decision making. Same with the Hawks, unfortunately. And someone that grew up in Atlanta, that has been a frustration of mine for many, many years, and probably will continue to be a frustration for many years to come. But the blueprint is there. That's what I'm saying. Philadelphia showed you the way. and maybe somebody in the front office there in Atlanta was paying attention. I'm going to wrap that up for now as far as this conversation goes, and hopefully we'll be back in a few days with another episode. Again, I'm just excited to do this. The Second String podcast back in Athens had a lot of success, and I know a lot of you enjoyed listening to that. Shout out Logan Booker. And so hopefully we're on the road to something similar here. It's a casual show. It's a laid-back show. We're talking about a lot of topics, but that is definitely the way I like it, and I think that you will enjoy it as well. Third and Manageable. It is a Sea&Sky production. I'm Walker, broadcasting from the Palatial Studios here in Western North Carolina in the beautiful mountains. I hope that the rest of your week is wonderful and your weekend as well. Go Dogs. Beat Mizzou. I'll talk to you soon.